So hi, I'm Sarah from The Upcoming. Such a pleasure to be able to speak to you today. How are you?
Yeah, very well. Thank you for making the time to speak to me today.
Thanks for taking the time to speak to me. Maybe you could just kick off with a brief introduction to the effects of lying. What can people expect when they dive into this film?
Um, it is a delightfully chaotic comedy. It's got lots of kind of twists and turns. But really, I was thrilled when I read the script because it was a story about a British Asian family that had nothing to do with them being British Asian, and actually was just a story, a universal story about family and love and loss, and was just so excited and thrilled to read something like that, and knew I had to make it, and thus started the journey.
I think chaotic was exactly the word I sort of had swirling around when I was watching it, but brilliantly so. And also kind of, yeah, what you said about kind of representing a South Asian, family in the UK, but
Mm.
it felt very original. I felt like it wasn't something that I'd seen before. And
Mm.
even where, when you first starting to watch it and you're watching the family dynamics, it kept surprising me again and again, with each twist and turn. So yeah, so when you first picked up that script, what were the key things that stood out to you, and how did you come on board to make it?
Yeah, so I was directing a TV show, and James was editing it. He's the writer, and we were swapping scripts, and he gave this to me, and yeah, I think what I kind of really connected to was the story of Naveen, the central character played by Ace Batty. This idea of someone who's kind of repressing secrets over a long period of time for his family because he thinks it's the right thing to do, and on this day, it all kind of unravels, and it's this journey from kind of living an inauthentic life because you think that's going to keep people happy around you, to kind of facing the truth, and that journey to kind of redemption. And I think it's quite a hopeful ending, even though there's kinds of ups and downs along the way. And I think that was a thing that really moved me, and I thought other people would be moved by, because it is kind of outrageous and funny and entertaining, but it's got that heart to it. And we were able to assemble a brilliant cast because they thought the same. They were so excited to be able to play roles where, it wasn't an issue-based kind of story. It was, they just got to play three-dimensional characters. And yeah, it does twist and turn. We just had we're still kind of like reeling from our preview screening at the BFI last night at NFT1, which was a sold-out screening, which was brilliant. And you could really feel the audience. I was happy because we could feel the audience kind of go with it on that journey. There were some gasps, there were some laughter at the right points, and a few tears as well. So hopefully, audiences can go along that journey with this family.
And yeah, maybe we can talk a bit about your incredible cast. And obviously they're kind of familiar faces from different kind of shows that, very well known here in the UK, EastEnders and Holby City and things like that.
Mm.
But I love the sort of way you put them together. And I guess maybe playing with some of those stereotypes of what we're expecting from each of them, from each of the characters,
Mm.
particularly Ace, with sort of, I guess, because also it sort of plays out in one day. You feel like you're there with him, like, for each shock that he's receiving, the audience is as well. And, all the different emotions he has to portray. It's quite a
Mm.
tricky role, but, he does it. He absolutely lands it all the way through.
Absolutely, and I think that when I talked to Ace initially, well, another thing to say, we made this in a very micro budget way. We shot it in 12 days. We really took kind of the bull by the horns, as it were, as filmmakers, me and John Tarsi, the producer, because we just wanted to kind of tell this story, and we didn't really want to go, or felt that we needed to go down kind of traditional industry routes. And Ace had some questions like, okay, how are we going to do this in 12 days? And I thought, really it was about foregrounding the stories, and kind of, as a director, like taking, not doing any kind of funky stuff with the camera, and really it's about the story and the characters and the acting, and really we tried to play the truth of it. And that's what I said to Ace and all the actors that came on board. It is funny and entertaining as a film, but it's not funny for any of these characters. It's like the worst day of his life in a way, but it kind of turns into the best day of his life by the end. But like, it was just playing the truth of every moment, and trying to keep it grounded as the kind of roller coaster of the revelations kind of happen as the story unfolds.
And I also wondered, because of the setup, it almost maybe felt like a theatre play at times. And I wondered in the way you had to prep it, perhaps, whether you had to kind of rehearse or whether it had that kind of atmosphere on the set and because it's this ensemble cast, rather than maybe doing like a traditional film in so many different locations and, jumping around the timeline, so on and so forth.
No, absolutely. It was actually written by James as a play first, and I think it was shortlisted for the Bruntwood Prize, but it was never produced. And I do think it is theatrical in the sense that it is dialogue driven and it is character driven, but and as you say, limited locations. Most of it happens in one house. But I think there's also so many films that happen in this closed chamber way, like, I don't know, something like Sally Potter's The Party or something like that, where and hopefully it does have a filmic tone. And there is a real kind of, we designed it quite carefully in terms of the tone and the music. The score by Luis Almau, I think is really wonderful. And I think it was, we wanted that on-screen representation, and it felt filmic to me somehow. And hopefully that is communicated. But you are right. We did do rehearsals. We had big page counts on day, so it did feel theatrical. So one day we had an 18-page day, which is a pretty mammoth thing to do, but we kind of prepped it to allow for that. Like in terms of our camera approach, we kind of have a kind of loose handheld style that gives a kind of freedom for actors, and you don't have to hit precise marks and kind of let them be more organic. And me and the cinematographer Adam Singodia really looked at one of the films that kind of inspired us in terms of the style was Another Round, the Thomas Vinterberg film. And there was a scene at the beginning where they're all kind of the friends are kind of all around the dinner table, and it's kind of this composed handheld feel which makes you just part of the group. And we just wanted to do that for this film. Hopefully you just feel like you're an observer in this house, and hopefully you forget about the camera pretty quickly, and it just puts you in there with the characters.
And you're mentioning there the tone, which I think is really crucial, and it's a key part of the originality that you feel, and because it's constantly sort of walking this tightrope between sort of the comedy and the tragedy, which I guess great British tradition of that, and so it kind of can sort of move very quickly from one to the other. So was that something difficult to pull off? They're all in the script. Obviously, getting the actors to some of the banter even between the father and daughter right at the beginning really had me cracking up from the beginning. So how was it to land that tone?
I think that was the most challenging thing, really, Sarah. I think that was what excited me and kind of scared me about taking it on. And I think that was something that we really tried to craft in the edit. Josh Whitelaw's our editor, and we really spent a lot of time on that. And I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier of just playing the truth of it. Like it is funny to watch, but they're never playing the gag. The actors, when we were doing it, we never thought, oh yeah, that's going to be funny. We just thought, just play the truth of this moment. This is all kind of we played it straight and dramatic. Really, it just happened to come off as funny. But then I hope that audiences do go along with that journey and can. I think audiences are really sophisticated, and I work a lot in television, and commissioners and stuff get very uncomfortable when you start saying comedy drama. But I think that audiences do love that. I love it as an audience member, and hopefully, the journey does chart. We felt it in the room yesterday, but hopefully, did you go along with that kind of shifting tone and that shifting kind of between the comedy and the drama?
Yeah.
And the feltness? Hopefully, it's got heart as well.
I think that's just it, and I do think that there is something very, very British about that, and I think that it is always one kind of comes with the other, and it's all a jumble, and then the nuance of it as well. Like none of the characters, like we say, we sort of have this setup, and perhaps we have stereotypes in our minds, and they're constantly being broken down, and so being able to navigate that is definitely part of the joy of it. The next thing I was going to ask was, because of the chaos, were there any chaotic moments in the making of it? What were some of the highlights, maybe the challenges along the way?
We had massive challenges, like doing it in a micro budget way. shooting it in 12 days. Big page counts and things. But to be honest, one of our biggest coups was kind of getting that location in King's Cross, which is difficult for major movies, let alone productions like ours. But John, the producer, did a great job to get us that kind of permission. But to be honest, Sarah, when you're dealing with, we could only achieve that kind of shoot because we were so well prepared. The crew were incredible. We prepped it very, very hard. We knew exactly every shot and every kind of setup. The costume department, the art department was so on it. It really ran quite smoothly, to be honest. And I think that's the only way we could have done it. And that's kind of, I've got a background in kind of fast television making, and that's why I thought we could have. And it's the same when you're doing those kinds of shows. It's all in the prep. You have to be very, very organized and hope that no disasters happen, and no disasters really did. And the actors were amazing. They really brought that A game. They a lot of lines, a lot of story to tell on each day, and they really brought it. They were fantastic.
Do you have a favorite scene when you watch it back, or when you were in the cinema yesterday? Did anything take you by surprise? Like, wasn't expecting a laugh there, but that one definitely tickled everyone.
There were some gasps and things, that thing, but for me, the heart of the film, I was going to say this earlier actually as well, it is the relationship between Naveen and Simran, his daughter, so Ace Bhatti and Lauren Patel's character. I think they work so amazingly together, and in a way, the whole film is about that relationship and how we're trapped in our lives sometimes. And Simran is, the new generation that manages to break away at the end of the film. But it's when they're in the Chinese restaurant, and I don't want to give spoilers or whatever, but there's this question of parenthood and kind of identity. And Ace kind of looks at her and goes, "I don't know who I am," and it's this thing of like, she is feeling so angry at her dad, but he's just like, "Look, I'm as lost as you." And like I just really, I actually was moved a little bit. A tear did come up to my eye at that moment, because I think I could really feel it in the room that people were in that moment with them. And I think that's such a universal moment that kind of anyone can connect to.
And in terms of the takeaways, like we say, we're on this roller coaster journey. We're following it with our main character, but there are some really key themes in there, and perhaps it's kind of the idea of tradition that we're still sort of grappling with. What you've inherited from your parents, but now we're in the modern day. What's supposed to be a nuclear family, and of course, often that's not how things play out, and these ideas of identity and the relationships you can have. Can you still have those family connections if you're not truly family? Well, of course you can. So it's just finding all those different ways of living in the modern world right now.
Absolutely. And I think like this idea of cultural expectation and familial expectation, it is actually more foregrounded normally in South Asian stories. Here, it was great because James, the writer, is actually, he's from Birmingham, kind of a white man from Birmingham, but he's married to a Punjabi woman. So he's got this insight into the community. And what I loved about the script is that idea of duty and kind of familial expectation, particularly on the character of Sangeeta, or Layla's character, is there, and it informs the story, but it's not kind of the driver of the story. And also, I think that that kind of idea of familial expectation and that kind of thing is not unique to South Asian. That's kind of universal as well. We've all got some kind of have to grapple with this idea of what our families and our kind of sense of duty or something, how that affects our lives. So I think that that was what was interesting about this material, that it was kind of, it informed the South Asianness, the British South Asianness of it, but also kind of remained universal as well.
And in terms of kind of, representation, why do you think it's important to have different communities represented on screen? And like you say, it not being the first and foremost, issue that's there. What difference does that make to people to be able to see themselves reflected? And, I do think there's been a shift, but maybe it's been a lot slower than it could have been. I think back to Bend It Like Beckham and how that felt like a really watershed moment, success of that film. But it's been very slow, I guess, to say that we've had, everything's now completely blown open and you see all sorts of communities represented. It's slower than that, would you say?
Absolutely. And look, I love, there's a rich history of, British Asian cinema in this country, and we're kind of building on that. But I do think that The Effects of Lying is new, and I kind of find it amazing that it is new. The fact that, this, a lot of the questions at the Q&A and what the actors were talking about last night was about just being so thrilled to tell a story about them not being British Asian, which is, that didn't have anything to do with them being British Asian. I mean, the fact that is kind of new or exciting for actors is mind-blowing. But that's what I had when I read the script. That's exactly what I felt. And I was like, wow, I really want to tell this story. I wish I had this growing up, because that's what I can say, is that I wish I had it growing up. I wish 15 or 16-year-old me could have watched a story like this, and I really would have enjoyed it. So hopefully we can connect to audiences and a universal one. That's why we're thrilled with the release on ITVX. We get to a mainstream audience. We're really happy to partner with them. Anyone in the UK with internet can watch this film for free. And we want to, this is an audience-facing, entertaining film. That's what we wanted it to be, and just hope to connect with audiences and entertain and move them, hopefully.
And just out of time, but very quickly, do you think as well, not to get too political, but in terms of progress and society and representation, the current government that we have, I sort of feel like we're taking one step forward and two steps back. And it's kind of this, post-Brexit, this acceptance of what it means to be British, what it means to be British Asian, seems to be, regressing in some way. And, it's kind of, we're not where I'd hope we'd be, at this in 2023 in that sense.
Yeah, it is fascinating. I mean, like in terms of artistic output, for me, it's like I don't want The Effects of Lying to be a definitive account of what it is to be British Asian. I don't think that exists, and I don't think any film or story can do that. But what I do think is that there should be a spectrum of kind of representation, and I think there is space for that to happen, and there is much more nuanced representation happening. So, I mean, what does it mean to be British Asian? I don't know. I've got a particular take on it based on my experiences, and I think that lots of other people have different ones, and there is space for all of that. And I think that I just hope people go out there and tell their stories, which is kind of what we did in a very we didn't think we were going to get back by the industry, so we just did it. I didn't think that I know commissioners and I know exec producers, and I was like, they're not going to get this, so I'm just going to go out there and do it. So hopefully more people do that, and we get a rich range of representation and nuance.
Just super quickly, do you know what you're going to be working on next? Have you already got your next project lined up or not yet?
Yeah, I'm doing a TV show for ITVX. I'm directing an episode of Ridley starring Adrian Dunbar next, but I'm also doing developing our next feature film with producer John Tarsi. It's an adaptation of a Rabindranath Tagore short story. It's a horror feature. It's updated to be set in contemporary London. So excited about that one.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing all that with me. Can't wait for everyone to see The Effects of Lying, and good luck with your next project as well. Thanks a lot.
Thanks very much, Sarah.